Here's something that I haven't done in a while. This is a Quo related haul video, although saying that I did the Vinted and Music Magpie ones recently, but if you're new here, then the purpose of the video is to show you some Status Quo related products that I picked up recently. So let's start with this one. This is the Status Quo Archive Series, Official Archive Series, Volume 1, live in Amsterdam in 2010 as part of the Pictures Exposed tour. So these have previously been released, but I think they were mainly at gigs and stuff, weren't they? They were mainly sort of there, but this has been fully remixed. There is a Volume 2 out now, but only just got my hands on Volume 1. Really cool to hear the band at this point, with the lineup of Rick Parfitt, Francis Rossi, Matt Letley, Andy Bowen and John Rhino Edwards. It's the band I saw live, so there's always going to be a degree of nostalgia for me when it comes to that. I think they also released this on record as well. Have you bought this on record? What does it sound like? Do let me know in the comments below. Let's move on to the second item, the first of two DVDs, Status Quo Anniversary Waltz. A celebration of 25 rockin' years. Now I know what you're thinking, 1982 and all the subsequent stuff was their 20th anniversary, but the date changed after a certain point. So that first date was commemorating that 1962 year in which Francis and Alan first formed a band that would become Status Quo. From a certain date onwards, 1965, the date in which Francis and Rick met at Butlins in Minehead, would become their anniversary. That's kind of how they would sell it. And so, in 1990, they went to Butlins in Minehead and played a gig there, and obviously this refers to the train that they took on the way to the gig, and I believe fans were there too. It was like this whole event, and it was certainly something during the David Walker years. He certainly knew how to do a number of publicity stunts and the like. So this was released on VHS back in the day. This is an early 2000s DVD release. Didn't cost me that much actually. Very, very cheap. And this has been released in several forms. I've also got another one which is Live Legends, which is basically the same thing, but I think there's some extra stuff on here that isn't on the release, on that release. And what I would say about this is that it's the band at their height in the early 90s. You know, the band were kind of on a high point at that point. I think they'd really found themselves with the new lineup. However, the presentation of this keeps that publicity train going by putting graphics over the top and making it into a program rather than a recording of a live concert. So you've got all these overlays and it kind of goes off into old clips, and there's a very bizarre moment during Caroline where it kind of cuts away for a second to an early 80s, I think 1982 ironically, clip of Quo playing Caroline with Alan Lancaster. So yeah, there's some very odd cuts, and of course there's vox pops over the top with journalists and other bits and pieces. One day they need to find the tape with the actual recording on it and just release that, because that is quite annoying when it comes to this, because it's one of the very few pieces of like a full live performance from Quo in okay to excellent quality, I would say. So slightly disappointing, but you still get to see the band live at this point. Let's move on to the last item here. Famous in the Last Century. This is the DVD release. This is a slightly later reissue, but got it very, very cheap. Famous in the Last Century, I've given my opinions on the album before. It's not their finest hour, it's their second covers album. I think Don't Stop is better, but following on with exactly the same kind of marketing technique, even though not as successfully here, Don't Stop had the live performance, well, mimed performance really, of the album, and this is basically that same thing. The only thing is, when I watched Don't Stop, the VHS, it's never been released on DVD, I kind of get almost a music video vibe with all of it, whereas this feels like it's really masquerading as a live performance. But it's obvious that they're miming at the same time. I mean, personally, I've always liked the artwork associated with this, the album cover with all the faces from the 20th century, and always interested in the choice of those faces and such. But, yeah, the execution of this isn't their finest hour. I know in the early days, if you look up on YouTube some of the most viewed Quo videos, a lot of these covers, I think, come up as like the most viewed because they were uploaded at the beginning of the service's life, and people would search for these songs and they'd find Quo's cover, and I think to someone outside the camp it goes down well in the main, I think. But the bonus here, they have a bonus which was also on the VHS, which is, if I can get that in focus, yep, we've got some bonus interviews there with Francis and Rick. Straight talking, which I remember from the VHS. So that's kind of the reason, I think, to purchase these. Purchase this one. I did own it on VHS, but I had to sell my VHS and some of my tape collection actually when I was a bit low on funds. At one point, I really needed to buy something, and I had to sell some Quo stuff in order to afford it. So to be able to get this on DVD and replace that copy that I had previously, although one day, if I feel like it, I might start collecting the VHS again. But to get it on DVD and in very good quality, I might say it looks very good in my Blu-ray player upscaled. So yeah, that's Status Quo, Famous in the Last Century. What do you think of this album? What do you think of the DVD? Are you a fan of the live performance? They actually did, and mimed performance, they actually did a live performance afterwards, which I don't know if it was filmed or not, although I think I've seen something. They should release that, yeah, and put it as Famous in the Last Century again or something, I don't know. So yeah, Famous in the Last Century. Have you got any of these? Do let me know in the comments below, and I will see you again for another episode of the Quo-Cast.